Welcome everybody to my first installment of my series of my favorite films of all time. For those of you who don't know, every month this year I will be reviewing one of my favorite films of all time. And let me tell you, deciding which 12 films of mine were my favorite of all time was a chore. Originally, I had a couple dozen, and there was a lot of self-deliberation and constant changing of the list throughout the weeks. There were movies that were on the list, sometimes really high, and then literally the next day they were gone in favor of other films that I forgot to even mention. It was tough, but overall, I think I did it. I think I found 12 films of mine that I love more than any other. So I guess you could call this an almost extended version of a top 12 list in a way. But regardless, before I get into the full on review, I do have some things I must note. First of all, for all of my favorite movie reviews, this is going to be spoiler-filled. No matter how old or recent, no matter how known or unknown the movie, this is my chance to just go off on why I love these movies more than any others. And along with that, since these are my favorite movies of all time, I'm not going to give them a grade, mainly because obviously they would all get A+, so what's the point in giving them a grade? But with that out of the way, let's dive into my first pick. A movie that I discovered when I was early in high school, absolutely fell in love with it, and is a must-watch for me at least a couple times every single year. And for me, that film is without a doubt Kevin Smith's 1999 film, Dogma. A religious comedy so hated by so many hardcore religious peoples that before this movie came out and there were protests involving its release, Kevin Smith actually joined in on those protests and was interviewed, a complete and utter accident by the newscasters. But apart from the hilarious subtle troll marketing of the film, what is it about the movie itself that I absolutely love? Well, for starters, this movie does something that a lot of movies I'm going to talk about throughout this series do. This takes what should be these icons, larger-than-life stoic figures, and brings them down to our level. Every single character in this film, whether they're human, angel, demon, dead, undead, are so personable, and the cast have such great chemistry that every single person in this film feels like a real human being. Even when, as I said before, most of them aren't human beings. While Linda Florentino as the lead character Bethany doesn't get a whole lot of praise for her performance in this film, I think she is wholly underappreciated. She is marvelous in this movie. Not only does her sarcastic and witty attitude act as a perfect straight man compared to the ludicrousy around her, but she's also given a lot of very emotional moments, sometimes more subtle than others. My favorite moment of hers in the film is when she's talking to Bartleby, which we'll get to in a minute, and she's just laying it all out on the table how she lost her faith. And the choked up inflection in her voice and the constant glassy eye she gives during this monologue. It's nothing gigantic, but it feels real. It feels like someone who was just broken down for most of her life, but instead of going on this drunken outrage about it, it just feels like she's given up. But I'll be honest, if I were to just gush about the entire cast and how fantastic they all are, we would be here all day because this cast is not only star-studded, but it's all fantastic. You got Chris Rock as Rufus, the forgotten 13th Apostle, who has absolutely some of the funniest single lines in the entire movie. You got Selma Hayek as the Muse Serendipity, who after she decided to get a body, suddenly got writer's block and was stuck there. Alan Rickman as Metatron is everything that we love Alan Rickman for. You got Jason Lee as Azrael the Demon, who you can tell is just having so much fun in this villainous role. And George Carlin as a Catholic cardinal is pure genius. But if I'm being honest, there are really two duos in this movie that I do need to highlight. One of those duos includes the best comedic relief ever put on screen, Jay and Silent Bob. I had seen them in slight cameos in other works outside of Kevin Smith's movies beforehand, but it wasn't until this film that I really grew to love the dynamic between the two. Not only is Jay hilariously unhinged in ways that could not be done in movies today, but Silent Bob is able to match that humor without needing to say anything. It's all in Kevin Smith's hilariously expressive reactions. And the two of them together, while childish and stupid at times, is the perfect amount of childish and stupid to make it an almost genius level of stupidity. And the other duo that I need to talk about is, of course, Bartleby and Loki, played by Ben Affleck and Matt Damon. I'm sorry, I know these actors are fantastic, and before this film they had great performances, and long after this film they had great performances, but these will always be my favorite performances from Ben Affleck and Matt Damon. Their chemistry in this film is perfect. The fact that in real life they were friends since childhood makes their chemistry all that more believable when you learn about the history of Bartleby and Loki and understand that they've not only been friends for years, but for millennia. And you can really understand the resentment that they both feel in their own ways. Loki wanting to exact vengeance on all of the idolaters before he's allowed to return home, and Bartleby frustrated that he's not even allowed to return home without destroying the universe. You really understand both of their characters, both of their motivations, and they're given a lot of time to develop them. Not only are the scenes where they're just talking about the biblical atrocities that they've done in the most nonchalant way possible hilarious, but when they're allowed to go fully dramatic, that's where you can really see just how talented these two really are as actors and how much you really understand these two characters. It's one of my favorite meshes of actors, writing, and directing in any film. And if Kevin Smith ever decided that he wanted to make a full-on spin-off about Bartleby and Loki, I would absolutely be there. Whether it was a movie or a mini-series, I'm watching it because I love these two characters that much. And in terms of the writing of this film, it is genius. Not only is the satire of how commercial religion has become hilarious, especially when they portray the best thing this movie has ever contributed to modern cinema, the Buddy Christ, which that image alone is so iconic. But the interactions that the characters share in this film are so real. Sure, a lot of the times they're delivering constant exposition, but it's constant exposition with fantastic directing and amazing acting. The film is so charming that you don't really care how much exposition it throws at you because the way that it throws it at you is so likable. But I really do think this movie is at its strongest when it's discussing its viewpoints on its philosophy. Because all of its philosophies are so inclusive that for as many outlandish jokes as there are in the movie, you do see the fact that it is delivering a really warm-hearted message. Real messages telling the audience, you might not know everything, and that's okay. So it's important to not just close yourself off from any new answers that might be given. Always be open to the idea of the new. You don't need to change everything about who you are because you know those new things. That's the overall message of this movie, and it's a really powerful message. Honestly, whenever I watch this movie, I immediately go to my keyboard and start writing because this movie always gets me in the mood. And I haven't even gotten to the direction and the music in this film and how it perfectly balances so many tones. This movie is able to be goofy and down to earth in one second and biblically huge in the next. And the film has this perfect style where those two almost contradictory tones can mesh. And they do mesh, and they mesh very well, and it creates this overall extremely fun, yet at the same time, strangely epic story. It's an earth-shattering quest where someone must stop renegade angels from entering the gates of heaven. Yet at the same time, that quest is just from Wisconsin to New Jersey where you're aided by two stoners. It's a movie made of contradictions, accepts those contradictions, and uses those contradictions as strengths. And I absolutely love it for that. Guys, if you haven't seen Dogma, do yourself a favor and watch it. It is not streaming on any service, so if you can get the physical copy of it, do it. Trust me, you will not regret it. I sure don't. And guys, that's my first review of one of my favorite films of all time, Dogma. We'll call it my 12th favorite just for organization's sake, but if you're a Doctor Who fan like I am, you know 12 is nothing to complain about. Either one. Only real Doctor Who fans understand. Don't forget, guys, this series is not just going to be me talking about all of my favorite movies of all time. I want to hear from you. What's one of, if not your favorite movie of all time? Go off on it down in the comments below. Include a little description why it's your favorite. And before the month is over, I'll pick one of those comments, give you a shout out, and review one of your favorite films. Truth be told, I might be looking forward to talking about your favorite films more than I'm looking forward to talking about my favorite movies. Guys, thank you so much for watching. You really are the best. Do not forget to comment, subscribe, and click that bell icon down below to stay up to date on all things movie, all things TV, all things nerd.